Hello, good afternoon if you're in the UK. Good morning if you're in the States. This is the Team Super Dad podcast. My name is Johnny Jensen, the founder and creator of the Team Super Dad program and community. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by David Tomen, nootropics expert, known around the world for his knowledge and skills in nootropics. David, good day to you, sir. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I know. You can see by your tan that you are somewhere sunny. How is the weather today? Where are you joining us from?
Miami, and I looked at it. It's only supposed to go to 88 Fahrenheit today. So that's cool at this time of the year for us.
It is actually, yeah. I love Miami. I've been a few times. Went there on my honeymoon for a couple of days. I've got family who've got homes in Florida and stuff. So it's a great city. Have you always lived there?
I've lived here since 2001.
Went for the sunshine.
Well, I was living in the Caribbean. I lived in Antigua for 9 years.
Okay.
And I helped build the first cellular telephone company in the Caribbean. And we started out as a company called Boat Phone because we were just installing cell phones. This is back early days in cell phones when people were still carrying around these great big 3-watt phones with a strap on it, so you sling it over your shoulder.
I worked in mobile from 2004 to 2008.
Okay. So we were pioneers in this, and we started putting them on yachts. And then a couple of years after that, we got bought out by Cable and Wireless, big British telecom.
Yeah.
And I ended up the group sales and marketing manager for the Caribbean for Cable and Wireless Mobile for 9 years. And
good times.
That was amazing. I love the islands.
And
then when I decided I wanted to leave the islands, I didn't know what to do, but I knew that things were happening in the States. So I decided to come up here. I knew people. I first ended up in Austin, Texas. I was recruited to work for a .com, and the .com ran out of money, and I was looking for something to do, and I knew people in South Florida. So I ended up in South Florida, and I've been here ever since. Never left. Lovely.
And we're on the Team Super Dad podcast, of course. So are you a dad in any way? What's your family situation?
I'm a stepdad. I just celebrated my 14th anniversary. My wife, Lara.
Congratulations.
I've been married. We met January 2006 on North Miami Beach. And I saw her, fell in love. 6 months later, we were married. And
this is a good. Let me ask you about this, because this is, especially dads who are looking to get into new relationships. So what? You just spotted her walking along, or
I saw this gorgeous blonde on down by the water, and a friend of mine, Robbie, was beside me, and I said, "Who is that girl down there? She's gorgeous." And she really is beautiful. And he says, "Well, that's Lara." And I said, I want to meet her. And so Robert, being Robert, we call him Tarzan because he had this long ponytail hanging down the back.
Okay.
He went down to the water and dragged Lara back and introduced us, and we fell in love, and we got married 6 months later, and I inherited 2 kids, 2 teenagers.
Wow.
Yeah. Now I got 2 grandkids.
No, because people often feel nervous about even just introducing themselves to a stranger. I was single
for years because I was divorced I was divorced 7 years before that.
Right.
And I had absolutely no interest in getting married again, like none. And I dated here and there, but it was just kind of like, because I really had my heart broken. And but when I saw this girl, man, it changed my life.
And so you said she's gorgeous, right? Did you think at first she was out of your league?
I've never thought that, because I've always found that really beautiful women tend to have a hard time finding dates.
Yeah, true. But equally, and that's because a lot of men think they're out of they don't have the confidence.
Out of reach. So,
out of reach. Yeah. They don't go and approach them.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's a fabulous encouragement to myself, but also to any dads that are listening to this. Brilliant. And being a step parent is a challenge as well. It's almost one of those unspoken subjects. We cover it a lot on the Team Super Dad community and in the podcast. It's it's as well as responsibility to that child, there's also responsibility to the to the biological dad and not getting in the way and things. It can be a challenging role.
I think that I had a bit of an advantage because I didn't have kids prior.
Right.
So I didn't know what being a parent was like, except for, my parents who I've had amazing parents. My dad is still alive. He's 94. He worked until he was 86 years old.
Brilliant.
So I had an amazing upbringing, but I never had any preconceived ideas of what it was like to raise a kid with another woman. So when I met Lara and her two kids were part of the picture, it was all brand new for me, and I just kind of figured it out as we went along.
Brilliant. Well, you mentioned as we were talking that the mom and the dad, Lara and the dad and yourself, you all get on relatively well, and that makes things so much easier.
Sure, yeah, it does.
Everybody should strive for that. Wow, thanks for sharing so much of that, David. That's it's good to get related and to share that with the audience as well. So the subject of nootropics, not many people even know what they are, let alone are able to confidently call themselves the nootropics expert. And if anyone's doubting that, they should see how much you've written on the subject and all the different podcasts you've been on. So, without doubt, you are definitely a renowned person on this subject. What the hell are nootropics, though, for those people that don't know, and how long they've been around?
Nootropics have been around for millennia because now, the word, let me tell you where the word nootropic came from. There was a doctor named Dr. Corneliu Gurgea, who he's a Romanian psychologist and chemist, and he synthesized piracetam in 1963. And he was in St. Petersburg, I think, working with Pavlov. Remember Pavlov's?
Yeah, and his dog,
dogs? Yeah. He was working with Pavlov, and he invented piracetam. And he invented piracetam for it's a derivative of GABA, so it was intended to be a calming type of drug for motion sickness. But despite this connection with GABA, that's not the way it worked out.
Right.
What Dr. Gurgea found was that piracetam modulates AMPA receptors and it boosts the function of acetylcholine in your brain, and as a result, has a significant impact on learning and memory. And so they put it out as a prescription drug, and it's still used in some countries today around the world as a prescription drug. And there's a whole bunch of offshoots off of that. So
one second, when you say synthesize, that means creating in a lab an otherwise natural product.
Correct. It's a derivative of GABA, which is a natural neurotransmitter in your brain.
Right. Okay.
And so Dr. Gurgea saw what was going on, that there were a bunch of offshoots, all derivatives of GABA with the same nucleus or the same core. People were inventing different drugs all around the world, all racetams based on piracetam. So he figured that he wanted to call this class of drugs something, and that's where nootropics came from.
Right.
It's derived from the Greek nou for mind and trepan to bend, so to bend the mind. And that was in 1973. And then he went one step further. He decided that he was going to define what a nootropic is. And this is all this is written down, it's recorded. A true nootropic enhances memory and the ability to learn. It assists brain function under disruptive conditions like the lack of oxygen or electroconvulsive shock. It protects the brain from chemical and physical toxins like cholinergic drugs and barbiturates. It increases natural cognitive processes, and it must be non-toxic to humans. So, but now when people have taken license with this word and they call everything that affects the brain a nootropic, which is not, I take issue with that because to my mind, nootropics are a cognitive enhancer that's natural that you don't need a prescription to get. In other words, you can buy it at your local Whole Foods or at the vitamin shop or your local health food store, and you don't need to go to your doctor to get a prescription. And what the press is doing is they're taking things like Adderall and Ritalin and prescription stimulants, and they're referring to them as nootropics. And I think that's a sin.
Well, it's a complete disservice to the.
It is.
Yeah. Okay, so
To
listen.
the definition of a true nootropic. And so I've been harping on this for the last 5 years, and just I don't know if people are getting the message or not, but a nootropic is just a natural substance that helps the human brain somehow, that you don't need a prescription to buy. And I've reviewed complete reviews of close to 100 different supplements now that affect the human brain. So,
and that's perfect, because you just wrapped it all up there at the end by saying exactly what the nootropics are. And that's why it's gaining interest from people, because it's giving people access to creativity, to concentration, to higher levels of performance in, I guess, any area of life really, but quite commonly work and creative arts and those kind of things.
Even in their relationships. I mean, because there's nootropics that can be used for anxiety. There's nootropics that can be used for depression. Nootropics for PTSD. Nootropics for OCD. Just about anything for preventing Alzheimer's and dementia.
Yeah.
And stroke. So it's amazing what nootropics can do. I kind of like stumbled upon it when I first encountered it. 13 years ago now. I'd never heard the word nootropic.
So what were you up to? What was your work? What was your work then?
When I met this beautiful blonde in North Miami Beach, I was a yacht broker.
Okay.
But remember, in 2008, the economy
recession.
Changed. Yeah. And so I couldn't sell a new yacht if my life depended on it. And I decided to start a marketing business. But I was having a real problems trying to build this business, and my wife saw what was going on. And so she introduced me to the psychiatrist in Palm Beach, which is north of here, who was kind of like a rock star. He's one of these unique individuals that are just amazing at their job. And he sat me down, and within 10 minutes, he diagnosed me adult ADD and PTSD. And it took me another 10 years before I think I knew where PTSD came from. But adult ADD, man, that was the story of my life, because we were talking earlier about how I lived in the Caribbean for 9 years, and I helped build the first cellular telephone company there. I've been to 45 countries.
Yeah, and 1 second, ADD, that's attention deficit disorder. So people might have heard that around, more commonly children. They talk about they're not concentrating in class, and they got a problem child on their hands, and they're ADD.
Right, there's ADD and there's ADHD. The H stands for hyperactivity. So I don't have a problem with hyperactivity, but I had a problem with focus, because every time I had a performance review, my yearly performance review, it was, David, you're a fantastic manager. You're really good with people, but you got to learn how to focus. And so I bought the books, and I bought on how to focus, and I bought the books on
like beating yourself up about
it. And I did whatever I could to learn how to focus, and I just could not do it. And this guy, this psychiatrist, said, "You're ADD," and he put me on Ritalin, and it was like somebody turned the lights on in my brain.
Yeah, I've heard about Ritalin.
First time in my life, and there's something about the ADD brain that is, our wiring is messed up. So we're not like a normal person. And there's something about stimulants that affect dopamine and norepinephrine. They affect the dopamine receptors and transporters. And there's something about the way they work that reroutes how dopamine works in the brain that helps the ADD and the ADHD brain.
And dopamine's a very happy drug, right?
Dopamine is involved in learning and memory. It's involved in mood. It's involved in libido. Dopamine is just involved in so many different things it affects so many different things in our life. But it certainly affects focus and concentration. The other one is acetylcholine. So what happened is that I had such success with Ritalin. It changed my life. A couple of years after I started taking it, I started growing tolerant to it. and it wasn't working as well. And I'm going, no, this is not going to happen.
Yeah.
For the first time in my life, I can focus and you're going to stop working. I don't think so. So I decided to find out how Ritalin worked. And I found that it was a dopamine reuptake inhibitor, and it affected dopamine transporters and dopamine receptors. And so if it wasn't working, what does that mean? Well, maybe I don't have enough dopamine in my brain. So I looked that up. And of course, but this was 13 years ago, and there wasn't 12 years ago, there wasn't a lot of this information around. So I really had to dig for it. But I found out that you could increase dopamine by taking L-tyrosine. So I went to a local GNC and I got some L-tyrosine.
Is that a prescription drug or over the counter?
L-tyrosine?
Yeah.
L-tyrosine is a supplement.
Oh, okay. Right.
You don't need a prescription to get it. It's easy to get. It's not expensive. And so I got L-tyrosine. I also found out that acetylcholine was involved in brain cell signaling, and that was a problem in the ADD brain. And so I'm going, okay, how do I improve acetylcholine function? And I found out that you need a choline precursor to make acetylcholine, because you can't take acetylcholine as a pill or a capsule.
Yeah.
And so alpha GPC or acetylcholine are both precursors to the synthesis of acetylcholine. And acetyl L-carnitine is just L-carnitine with an acetyl group added to it, is a cofactor in the synthesis of acetylcholine. Take those two together and I have more acetylcholine in my brain.
Right.
So
and L-carnitine, that's I think, do you see that quite often around gym supplements and stuff?
Sure. Yeah. But the problem with L-carnitine is it can't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Yeah. And so just to explain this to people, like precursor, that's a drug in the body that has to be present so the body can create another drug. That's right. In layman's terms, right? Yeah. And so people need to realize this quite often when people talk about thyroid problems and stuff, it might not actually be a thyroid problem. They might have a precursor that's not there, that's not producing enough is it TH3, TH4? And so these precursors are very important in the way that the human body works and the way they produce chemicals.
Well, oddly enough, the thyroid hormone L-tyrosine is involved in producing thyroid hormone.
Right. Okay.
Because
a friend of mine was given some
selenium and iodine and vitamin C and magnesium.
Yeah. And just like you said, you got wise about what Ritalin was doing. I would encourage people to get really wise about what, the doctor will prescribe, you've got a thyroid problem, so give some quite strong drugs. But actually, the long period of stress could have caused fatigue in the body on the adrenals or whatever else. And actually, it's those precursors that are causing the thyroid problem, not a poorly thyroid.
That very well could be true.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I went severely hypothyroid about 7 years ago now, and I got really, really, really sick.
Was this around the Ritalin stuff?
No, I finally got Ritalin working again, and everything was hunky-dory. And then a few years later, I just started getting really sick, and just out of the blue, and feeling really physically sick, and kind of like vibrating inside. And falling asleep at 2:00 in the afternoon, every afternoon.
What sort of age was this?
Pardon?
What sort of age was this?
Around 45.
Yeah. So quite a lot of Team Superdad listeners around sort of 35, 45, that sort of age. 50, so
yeah,
they could be experiencing these sorts of same things, basically.
So there was finally one day my wife panicked and she thought I was having a heart attack, and she took me to the ER. And so these guys tested my heart. My heart was fine, but they said, you're hypothyroid. So they gave me Synthroid, and Synthroid is just synthetic T4.
Right. Okay.
And I tried using that for 3 months, and I just kept on getting sicker. And I said, okay, I'm either going to die or I'm going to fix this. And I found out about natural desiccated thyroid, which is taken from a pig or a cow.
Yeah, bovine. Yeah, got that.
Yeah. And my brother's a doctor up north, and he had sent some down, and I started using it, and I started feeling better. But during that time, I completely lost my memory.
Just a curious little side effect,
Yeah.
or additional problem.
So I still had never heard the word nootropic up to that point. You know, I knew about L-tyrosine and citicoline and acetyl L-carnitine, but I hadn't heard the word nootropic. When I lost my memory, I started fixing everything else in this body. So I started feeling my marriage was on the rocks too. I mean, my business was failing. We were broke. Lara wanted to leave. I mean, it was really, really bad. So I was just fighting to get well again.
Yeah. And that is something lots of dads can relate to. That I call it buckets. So you've got different buckets in your life. All of a sudden, they're all looking pretty empty. You're sort of panicking, trying to find out which one is almost the most important, and it quite often will come back to your own personal health and well-being as the baseline to improve all areas.
In this case, it was just I had to get healthy again so I could start making money again if I expected my marriage to survive.
Yeah.
And so I chose to live rather than die. I mean, I was that sick.
Wow.
It was a choice. And so I started doing research again, like I'd done a few years earlier when Ritalin stopped working. And I learned about how learning and memory work in the brain. And that's when I started finding out about nootropics. But at that time, now this is like 7 years ago, there were no books on it. There were no websites on it. I had to go to places like PubMed and read clinical studies. And I read hundreds of clinical studies to try to figure out how to get my memory back. And I did. And when I finally started getting healthy again, just running a marketing company was too much, and I was going to concentrate on one thing. So I chose copywriting because I've been a writer all of my life. And so I got trained by AWAI up in Delray Beach in direct response copy. And I started writing copy for dietary supplement companies. And I worked with a company in the UK who had a nootropic stack, and I wrote some advertorials for them. And I found out when I was writing these advertorials, I was having a heck of a time trying to find information to back up my copy.
Okay, yeah.
And so I'm going, if I'm having such a hard time finding this information, what's everybody else doing? Because I'm pretty darn good at this. And I figured, well, the world needs some place to go. The world needs an authority on nootropics, and that's how Nootropics Expert came to be. I just decided to create the website, and that was 5 years ago now.
Yeah, that was around the same sort of time that I first heard of the word. I was looking at reasons why my wife was ill. You mentioned PTSD, that's post-traumatic stress disorder. Mm-hmm. She was experiencing autoimmune condition, physical pain, vivid nightmare, like it was just a disaster, right through to seizures and locked out syndrome. And I was listening to Sean Stevens' Model Health Show podcast, and that led me into some functional medicine podcasts, and that led me into new subjects, nootropics. And I was feeling like I was burnt out. I described it as burnt out. I couldn't keep going. Little did I know I was actually quite depressed from everything that was going on. But I started taking 5-HTP, which, as I understand, is a precursor to melatonin, which is a happiness kind of feel-good chemical in the body.
5-HTP is a precursor to serotonin, which helps synthesize melatonin.
Right, okay.
It's not the greatest way to increase serotonin because 5-HTP, the problem with 5-HTP is people dose it too high first. And the thing is it's a direct precursor. And you can run into the same problem with dopamine, with L-Dopa, is if you use a direct precursor, when you take that supplement, it immediately goes to your brain and starts making that neurotransmitter.
Right, okay.
Like there's no in-between steps, nothing. It grabs the cofactors it needs and it makes serotonin. And what people were finding is that 5-HTP works fantastic for about 5 or 6 weeks, and then it stops working.
Yeah.
And they're going, why? This stuff doesn't work. And it turns out, and this is just my theory, I've never seen any proof of this, but my theory and there's clinical studies that show that this is true.
Hmm.
After 4 to 6 weeks of regular daily supplementation of 5-HTP, it treated depression, but all of a sudden stopped working. I think probably what happened was that there became an imbalance of neurotransmitters. Because when you raise serotonin too much, you depress dopamine.
Okay, that makes
And
sense.
if you raise dopamine too much, you depress serotonin. Likewise.
So it's always about finding that balance.
It's always about finding that balance. Now, you can goose it up and you can have more serotonin, but you also need to support the rest of your neurotransmitters if you're going to do that. If you're going to optimize your brain so that it's kind of like just like supercharging a car,
Hmm.
you can supercharge your brain to a certain extent, but you've got to be careful that how you do that, because you can't just put new shock absorbers in it and expect to go an extra 100 miles an hour, right? There's more work that needs to be done. So instead of using 5-HTP to raise serotonin, use L-tryptophan, because
Okay.
L-tryptophan is 2 steps before making serotonin. It's safer. You can use a larger dose. It's easier to control. And so that's what I encourage people to use instead, is L-tryptophan.
Okay, nice. I will definitely. I'll look into that. And this is an interesting segue into this. We said people use nootropics in all different areas of life. Where, and this kind of brings it back to basics, really. You got your busy dad who's juggling his life. He's feeling a bit exhausted. Generally wants things to be perhaps slightly better in all areas. Where does he start with? Is it a self audit? Does he need to do like it on himself, or does he need to
That's
go
a good
away and
question.
find out about? Like, does he just suddenly become an expert on nootropics, or is there a multi nootropic that he can start with, kind of thing? Where does a dad start when he's looking at this? Sounds great, I can improve myself, but where the hell do I start?
Step number one is come to a nootropics expert.
Okay. Just do it
And
right.
I've written a few articles on exactly this kind of thing, because there's lots and lots of people that are still new to this. And so I've written articles on the best nootropic stack for the beginner. And what I do there is I walk people through how to assess yourself. Because you can't just grab something off the shelf from your local vitamin shop and expect things to get better. You need to kind of like evaluate what's going on. And so what do you want to fix? What do you want to improve? Do you want decision making and focus and thinking and processing speed to work better?
Yes.
Or do you want learning and memory to work better? Or is it a problem with energy and motivation? Or is it a problem with anxiety and depression? These are all separate categories.
Yeah. And speaking for myself, I've moved from depression and anxiety after the breakup, which got dealt with at the time. And now you get into like the rebuild part of life, or wherever, it could be a young couple trying to like excel. Then it gets into focus and creativity and decision making. Yep. So people's circumstances change as well. I can see that.
Yeah. So I've done the research, and when you come to the website, you can look at some of the different lists that I've made. There's one tab on the main menu called Best Nootropics, and there's a table. And so Best Nootropics for processing speed, decision making, focus, flow, and thinking. And then the recommended nootropics for that. And in this case, it's acetyl L-carnitine, which is just L-carnitine with an acetyl group added to it, so it can cross the blood-brain barrier. Aniracetam, which is one of the racetams, caffeine, CDP choline or acetylcholine, lion's mane mushroom, N-acetyl L-tyrosine or L-tyrosine, and the B complex vitamins. Any of those, or you can use all of those.
Yeah,
I do. Or you can just pick a couple of them and try them and see how they work for you.
Yeah. And what about caffeine? We talked before we went on air about this bulk powders nootropic that I bought, kind of off the shelf, just like you were saying, and it's got per 6 capsules, which is what is the recommended dose per. If you're taking it on that day, it takes 6 capsules, so that equals 200 milligrams of caffeine on that day. caffeine's in coffee as well, and caffeine's everywhere.
Yep.
Why do they put caffeine in a nootropic? Just for the buzz, or what does it do?
Because when people are new to this and they go to their vitamin shop and they're looking for a nootropic stack to try, and the manufacturer wants them to try it and feel something, they put caffeine in it.
For the buzz.
For the buzz. Because otherwise, if you don't put it in there, you're going to have an effective nootropic stack in all likelihood, but it's going to take a while for it to work. And it's going to take a while for you to start experiencing the benefits from it, because a lot of these things are very subtle in how they work. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
But caffeine, on the other hand, how caffeine works primarily is an adenosine antagonist. What happens is you've got mitochondria. You've got thousands of mitochondria in each one of your brain cells. And that your mitochondria produce ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, which is your main energy supply. That's where your cellular energy comes from.
Flowing all around your body.
Flowing all around your body,
right,
and
okay, yeah.
especially in your brain and in your heart. Now, that adenosine triphosphate, once it's used, it casts off adenosine. And adenosine builds up in your body during the day, and that's what causes you to start feeling sleepy. So eventually you go to bed.
Got it.
Caffeine blocks that process. It's an adenosine antagonist. An antagonist means that it blocks the way adenosine naturally works in your body and in your brain. So that's how it keeps you awake. But caffeine does a lot more than that. It affects acetylcholine. It affects epinephrine, which is adrenaline. It affects serotonin, and it boosts the use of dopamine.
So it can exhaust you in all areas, but too much caffeine can exhaust you in all areas. It's a real drain on the body.
It's a drain on the body, especially dopamine and the B. It's also a diuretic, so you end up pissing out the B complex vitamins.
But it's so funny. A lot of the energy drinks and stuff, they pump them full of B vitamins and caffeine.
Yeah, and if you take a look at some of the newer, if you are looking for a stimulant stack, and so you just want something that you can use as needed. So say you start flagging at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and you just need a little extra oomph, a little extra boost.
Yeah.
You can look specifically for a stimulant stack, but that stimulant stack needs to be built properly. If it's got caffeine in it, it's got to have L-theanine. The most basic nootropic stack is caffeine combined with L-theanine, because L-theanine helps boost levels of acetylcholine, norepinephrine, epinephrine, serotonin, and dopamine. It affects alpha and theta brain waves, which provide a calming effect. So it helps calm the stimulant or the jitteriness of caffeine.
Yeah, we can all relate to that. Yeah.
Right. So, but you also need to add in some extra L-tyrosine. So that stack should not only have caffeine and L-theanine, but it should have some L-tyrosine which is a precursor to dopamine. So you're boosting dopamine, and it should have the B complex vitamins in it, especially B6, B9, and B12, which are necessary cofactors for the synthesis of dopamine.
Right.
Right. So that's your stack. That's your stimulant stack. Caffeine, L-theanine, L-tyrosine, and B complex. It's an amazing stimulant stack. A lot of times what you'll find in the vitamin shop instead is a supplement that just has caffeine and L-theanine.
Wow,
and
okay.
it's not enough, because L-theanine, while it influences and it boosts, it kind of like boosts these neurotransmitters like serotonin and norepinephrine and dopamine in your brain, kind of like Ritalin does. Kind of like, not exactly like, but kind of like. It's not actually a precursor to the synthesis of these neurotransmitters.
Yeah.
Just like Ritalin is not a precursor to dopamine, right? Or Adderall is not a precursor to dopamine.
Yeah. So Ritalin and Adderall just kind of, they're like an interrupter. They just dive right in and interrupt things, and
they interrupt things, and they kind of like rewire your brain on how.
Because those two words, people commonly heard them perhaps around children getting prescribed those two things. I first heard of Ritalin because people in the London marketing community were getting hold of it to use for creativity and to work late nights.
And it's effective for that. It's not the
Yeah.
greatest choice, but it's effective
Yeah.
for that. It's also really hard on your receptors. Ritalin is safer than Adderall,
Yeah.
by the way. But yeah, if you're going to use stimulant drugs like that, you really need to support it with nootropics just to keep your brain safe and from harming it when you're using these stimulants. I
Yeah. Well,
created a stack for that too.
yeah. Well, I think that's the important thing is about knowledge. This, I hope today, for people who haven't ever heard about this subject or looked at the chemical, the movement, the creation and movement of chemicals around the body, some of what we've spoken about today might be a bit overwhelming, kind of like what the hell are they going on about? But
Yeah.
in your free guide, which we will link to from the show notes, and we can give a link to at the end of this as well. That's all listed there and explained, so that's really helpful for people. But it also, for me, comes back to the importance of knowledge and understanding about these things. We spoke when we were chatting together about rave culture and MDMA, and it's a lot of drugs in their simple and pure forms aren't necessarily that dangerous. It's just what they get mixed with or how they get used and abused, and that's how the danger can come. And this subject is no different. So for people middle-aged, busy, with goals in their life and things they've got to do on a day-to-day basis, getting knowledgeable about this subject can be a massive benefit to them. You've said so much about how it can benefit people, but just in broader terms, getting the right nootropic for your lifestyle, what can that do for someone who's feeling busy and overwhelmed?
It can change your life. I mean, it can do things. It depends on what you're doing and what you need it for. But it can improve your work because all of a sudden you're going to be more productive at work, and you're going to be the person at the table that remembers things better than everybody else in the room, and is able to come up with facts easier than anybody else in the room. You can think faster on your feet. Your relationships are going to be better because your mood is going to be better, and you're not going to be as irritable, and it's just going to be, you're going to be easier to live with.
Important.
And your dream life is going to be a lot better. I find it's just nootropics can affect every aspect of your life, both at home and at work and in athletics. I've built a stack for the e-gaming community.
Okay.
And I did consultations with people in the military, and so it can help anybody, really.
Sex life? What about sex life?
Sex life, it helps a lot. Well, dopamine, for example, is involved in libido.
Okay.
And if your libido is shot, take a look at your dopamine levels.
And this can obviously be both male and female, right?
It is male and female.
Yeah.
Because and I've written extensively on the aging brain, and I consult on the aging brain as well, because our brains just are age, and they get older and things stop working as well. And there are things that, like dopamine, for example, you lose about 10% of your dopamine production capability per decade, starting around age 35 or so.
Okay, so
Right?
By 55, you're 30%. Like, okay, you're a third down
So
on the guy across the table. Okay,
right.
wow.
So if you're 55 and you have no libido, chances are you don't have enough dopamine. So yeah, it can absolutely affect your sex life.
And can people take these things long term? So they get the stack. By the way, for stack, that means the cocktail, the mix of nootropics that someone's taking. That's what stack means, right?
There is no such thing as a one pill solution. That is something that we've been conditioned to believe by mainstream medicine, and that's just not the way the human body works or the human brain works. If you're going to fix something, just know that it's probably going to take a handful of capsules, and they're each going to do something different. But just don't expect to be able to get one thing like 5-HTP or L-tyrosine or St. John's wort and to fix something.
Yeah,
that's not the way these things work. It's going to take probably You have to learn how each one of these things work if you're trying to fix something, and know what you have to put together for the most benefit, right? Because
Yeah, totally.
dopamine, to synthesize dopamine, you not only need L-tyrosine, you need either phenylalanine, which is the dopamine pathway is this: is phenylalanine to L-tyrosine to L-dopa to dopamine to norepinephrine to epinephrine. Right? So dopamine and norepinephrine are the two really important ones. Epinephrine is your kind of fight or flight response, but
Okay. Yeah.
norepinephrine is kind of like your attention and focus and alertness. And dopamine is learning and memory and libido and muscle movement, and it's involved in all that. So, but you can't just take L-tyrosine with the expectation of making dopamine, because L-tyrosine also requires vitamins B6, B9, and B12, and magnesium and vitamin C all working together to create that dopamine molecule. And so you'll see a hint of this if you know what you're looking at when you look at the supplement facts label in some of these nootropic stacks you can buy in store. If they're saying that this is going to boost your learning and memory and alertness, and there's L-tyrosine in it, if you look towards at the very top or towards the bottom of the list, you're going to see vitamins B6, B9, and B12. That's why those are in there, because they're cofactors in the synthesis of dopamine. L-tyrosine that can't work on its own.
So a one-stop, this is called Complete Nootropic, my one, is that's actually just a marketing kind of bullshit, basically. No disrespect to the manufacturer, but to have a one nootropic fits all type supplement is nonsense, really, is what we're saying.
You know, you would be really, really lucky if it worked.
Yeah, silver bullet. Well, we kind of laugh, but or you'll probably get some benefit, but not really be able to attribute any clear benefits to it,
because
to your lifestyle.
If you tell me that, Jimmy, I need to fix learning and memory, so I'm going to say, all right, let's raise dopamine and raise acetylcholine, and prescribe L-tyrosine and acetylcholine and vitamin C and magnesium and the B complex vitamins. And I can say, take this much of each one of these things, right?
Yeah.
But that might be right for you, the amount, right? So for example, I use mega doses of L-tyrosine because I use Ritalin and I'm older. So I can take 1,000 milligrams of L-tyrosine first thing in the morning, along with the B complex vitamin, and it works fine for me. If you tried that, you would probably be going around the bend in about 20 minutes.
What, like in a confused way, or just like buzzing,
buzzing,
yeah,
jittery, and your heart would be racing, and so while each one of these things are common to each one of us, different amounts are going to be more appropriate for every. What works for me is not necessarily going to work for you.
Yeah, and is that trial and error for someone when they go and?
It's absolutely trial and error.
Okay, so like anything, they start with a lower dosage and just increase it. Well, like take it for a week and then increase it slightly, or take it for another week. This is
the other reason why, for beginners or newbies coming to this, I discourage them from getting pre-formulated stacks like this, because if you take that and it either doesn't work or you have a bad reaction to it, it's not because all nootropics are garbage. You reacted to one thing in that formula of 6 or 8 different ingredients, but there's absolutely no way you can tell what that thing is.
Yeah.
So if you first put together your own stack, learn how to do this, put together your own stack so that you end up with 4 or 5 or 6 individual supplements, figure out what the correct dose of each of those is. And if you've never taken any of these, take them one at a time. So take the first one and use it for a day and see what happens. And if there's no bad reaction, then add the next one and for a day or two and see what happens. If there's no bad reaction, add the next one. So as soon as you add something and you have a bad reaction to it, you know that you can't use that supplement.
Yep, got it.
And this is really important because there's some people like my wife, she cannot take any kind of a choline supplement. If she takes anything with choline in it, like alpha GPC or acetylcholine, she just goes bananas. She just goes psycho. And so
but that wears off, right? Like it's like for a couple of hours, something like that. It's not like a permanent thing.
No, it'll definitely wear off. It's not
of course,
threatening.
Right, yeah.
It's not, but it's really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah. And particularly someone who's never taken drugs, I suppose. You know, for me, it was interesting when after my marriage breakdown and I was diagnosed depressed and I went on to antidepressants, I feel like having taken a fair amount of drugs like ecstasy and stuff during my life, I was kind of much more tuned into how it was feeling, or whether it was working, whether it was too much, or whether I started to feel like, oh, actually I could start to come off this now. Someone who's never really experienced recreational drugs too much might not be familiar with those kind of experiences.
I call it listening to your body.
Right. Okay. But someone should naturally not. Well, I guess there's a fine line between overreacting and panicking unnecessarily, and being oblivious to the fact that you're like completely wired off your brain type thing.
Well, yeah. The only way that you can really make this thing, you can make anything work. This natural substances or drugs work is if you're listening to your body, and know what kind of effect it's having on your body and what kind of reaction you're having to it. I mean, and
could someone keep a diary, or is like quite practical things like that? Take notes.
Yeah, people do keep a log, and that's the most effective way to do it, is to take a log. Keep a log, and just keep your diary. And this is how much I took at this particular time of the day. And that's the other thing, is you can't expect to take this thing in the morning and expect it to work all day for you. Because a lot of these are amino acids and they have a half-life of 2 or 3 hours. So that L-tyrosine that you take at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning is not going to be there any longer at noon. So if you want the same benefit at noon, you got to take it again.
And is that okay? Can you keep taking it day in, day out?
Yes.
Okay, so so you get the stack right and it supports you. It's no different than an orange juice and there's other positive dietary intake.
This is food.
Yeah, food. Yeah.
Well, think about this. We used to get this from food. All of this stuff we used to get, other than the adaptogens, we used to get this stuff from food. 50 years ago, there wasn't a supplement industry. 100 years ago, there wasn't a supplement industry because we didn't need one.
It came from fresh food.
We got this stuff from fresh food. But it would take a bushel of apples today to get the same kind of nutrition that you would get from one apple in 1959.
Wow.
For all kinds of reasons, because this stuff is grown on depleted soil, and our carbon dioxide levels are double what they were a few decades ago, which means that plants are growing faster, and which is a good thing, but they're growing so fast that what nutrients that are in the ground that they typically draw up, they haven't got time to draw up because they're growing so fast.
Okay, yeah.
And then nutrients are lost during harvesting, they're lost during transport, they're lost during storage, they're lost during cooking, they're lost during processing. So by the time you get that food on your plate,
it's negligible difference.
And so everybody, especially in our modern world, in the Western world, that is not eating like really, really super fresh food right from the field outside into the kitchen and onto the table every single day, are deficient in so many things. And so the biggest favor you can do yourself is find a really good high quality multivitamin.
Yeah. And
you'd be amazed at how much different you would feel if you just had these nutrients in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've got one from Bulk Powders in the UK, and it is a good one. I trust that it's comes from good ingredients and has the right amount of all those essential nutrients and vitamins in it. and I think it's important to say, if something is a couple of dollars off the shelf in your supermarket, that's not the same as something that's $10 or £10 from a specialist provider.
That's correct. There's a couple of issues, and I've written extensively on this too. The dietary supplement industry is self-policing. Really, there's no authority that, like the drug industry, that is governed by some government authority. The supplement industry is self-policing. So the multivitamins that you can get from your supermarket or from Target or Walmart they're synthetic. The vitamins are synthetic and the minerals are ground up rock.
Okay, not great then.
Your body doesn't recognize it as food.
Okay, so this is a really important subject. Someone could have listened to all this and then gone out and bought something cheap because they were trying to save money, and actually know that you need to put in the research, not just to what you're going to take, but where you're going to purchase it from. So, what's your advice on finding a good supplier, a good source, a good shop?
Come to Nootropics Expert.
Hey, of course. That's sound advice.
Just know what you're buying and know how to read a supplement label, because not only do you want to find out, you want to know that you're getting the right form of each vitamin and the right form of each mineral. The minerals need to be chelated minerals and not ground up rock. And the vitamins need to be made from either a food source or from yeast, but in a form that your body, when it gets into your body's going to go, aha, that's food. I can use that. And so it'll get into your cells and it'll use vitamin A, vitamin B, vitamin C, vitamin E, like it would if you were getting it from a meal.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you want to watch for too is toxic ingredients, because every supplement facts label has other ingredients underneath of it. And there shouldn't be any other ingredients other than the capsule the thing is in, because what I've discovered is it's not necessary. And you're going to see things like magnesium stearate and silicon dioxide and just these chemical names that you don't know what they do. They're not there for your benefit.
Yeah. Like it could be the thing they clean the machine with or something like that.
They use them to help the powders flow through machines so that it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
They use it for a preservative so it doesn't spoil when it's sitting on the shelf. They use it for color. They use it so it smells better. But if you take a look at these chemicals that they use for this, every single one of these is toxic somehow to your body, right? Like silicon dioxide is used as a colorant, but it does bad things in your body. And so you want to avoid that. It is possible to make these supplements without other ingredients in them. So you want the natural ingredient in the capsule that your body is going to recognize as food so that it can go, oh, okay, I can use this. And you don't want anything else in that capsule. And it's possible to find. It's really difficult to find. There's somebody up the road from you, OptiNutra. They got their offices in Leamington Spa.
Okay.
They make a multivitamin that they've got their own, and it's grown in the lab on different types of yeast. It's called Nutrigenesis. They're vitamins and minerals. And that was the first time in my life that I ever took a multivitamin and I actually felt the difference.
Yeah. Well, they call it OptiNutra.
OptiNutra, yeah. The line of supplements is called Performance Lab. And they also make a nootropic stack. It's a different company, but it's owned by OptiNutra, Mind Lab Pro, which I've been using for the last 5 years as the base of my stack. But this is where I first got a hint of how these supplements can be made naturally. And there's no toxic ingredients in them, none. And they even make the capsule that they put the stuff in is made out of fermented tapioca instead of cellulose or veggie capsules, which are basically tree bark.
And this is people are thinking, oh, this sounds like a lot of hard work. it's the exact opposite of taking no responsibility. So drinking coffee all day, just burning ourselves out, eating lots of processed foods. It's the impact is so significant, and
It'll change your life.
yeah. So to take that level of responsibility and interest, it's about looking after something to get the results that you want. So you're wondering why your life isn't working quite so well. You want your relationship to be better. You want your business to perform better. You want to have a better time with your kids. You want to have more fun. You want to wake up with more energy, and yet you're not prepared to put the work in. It's this body that we have been gifted is a high performance vehicle, and so working out exactly what helps it run effectively and then going to the best possible source for that fuel, basically, is where we can find the success and the results that we strive for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you think about it, how much money do you spend on the supermarket every week? Right. So spend a little bit more on the supplements that you're getting, and all you're doing is you're supplementing what you're eating every day, and your brain is going to work better. You're going to feel better, and you're going to perform better.
Yeah. And just finally, because we haven't mentioned it yet, is this a subject to consider for our children? I don't mean like drugging our children, but like to what degree, particularly if the doctors are prescribing something, let alone the rest of us. But there is this spectrum where doctors are happily prescribing Ritalin for our kids. Then we've got our kids who naturally want to eat Haribo and Nerds and McDonald's. And then you've got the conscientious parent at the other end who's trying to cook natural food, which we've just heard has virtually got no nutrients in itself. So then at what level, I give my kids a multivitamin, but at what level can we think about this in terms of supporting our children?
Right. I've done lots of now personal consultations with parents that want to help their kids. And I have to be careful here because the human body is an amazing machine. And when you're young like that, it's very forgiving.
Right. Okay.
They typically come to me when they're dealing with something like autism, or their kid has got ADHD and the doctor wants to put them on Adderall and the parent doesn't want them to go on it. So what do? And you can do similar things that you do as an adult, but you just have to scale down the dose a lot to be more age appropriate. And just to see an example of this, go to someplace like Amazon and look at an adult multivitamin, a high quality adult multivitamin and a high quality kids multivitamin, and compare the amount of each ingredient.
Yeah.
And that'll just give you some indication.
Yeah, it's a huge difference.
Yeah. They're using the same thing that adults are, but much smaller amounts, because higher amounts can be toxic.
Yeah. And people have got to take great care in doing this. I'm sure, speak for yourself, but I'm not encouraging people to start buying lots of supplements for their kids. But on a basic level, like you just said, a decent multivitamin for our children is probably a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, I've got so many other questions that we could ask or dig into. No, but it's really interesting to consider because we never even touched on this. In the UK, a lot of people who are aged 35 to 55 were probably part of rave and clubbing culture and quite a lot of recreational drug use and the impact that might have had on them, and how we can be supporting that as we move into middle and later stages of life. And I'm pretty certain as well, off the back of this podcast episode and this live stream today, we'll get lots of questions. Dads inside the Team Superdad community, if you've got questions, then by all means ask them, and we may be able to in future create a Q&A session or something with David that can work in a way for specific questions.
Yep.
David, this has been fascinating, I kind of apologize, but also make no bones about it for people who thought like, what the hell was that all about? It took me years to understand the kind of podcasts and information that I was reading about my wife's now ex-wife, but her condition, until I started to really understand adrenal fatigue and precursors and TH3 and TH4 and thyroids and hippocampus. And I was like, it's not until you've listened to a whole bunch of podcasts or read a whole bunch of blog posts or picked up a couple of books that the repeated reference to these terms and to these chemicals in the human body and to these supplements, that it all starts to line up. And like any education, it then starts to make sense. It then starts to become something familiar. It then starts to become something you have a greater degree of confidence about. And the wrong thing to do is get put off on the very first time you look at it because it sounds overly complicated. The benefits are definitely worth it, and that knowledge that someone can take on board is what will build their future confidence and success. And so they just have to stick to it and put the work in.
Mm-hmm. I actually wrote a book too called Head First. That's been really popular, and it's almost 600 pages. First book since 1992 on nootropics.
Wow.
And it's basically a manual for your brain. So
well, listen, let's wrap up by telling people where they can get in contact with you, where they can find these books. I've been to your website and downloaded some of your ebooks already, so thank you for that. But where can and I'll put all this in the show notes. And if you're on the Team Superdad email newsletter, that's at teamsuperdad.com. This will all be included in this week's newsletter. But David, if you want to share where people can come and get in contact with you directly, please do.
Okay. The main website is nootropicsexpert.com, nootropicsexpert.com. And there you can download your free book. It's called Secrets of the Optimized Brain. It's, I think, 92 pages. And it's got 90-some supplements, 80-some supplements in it that I briefly describe how they work, what they do in your brain, why you would want to take it, and the recommended dosage. So it's a nice freebie. And all I ask is for your email address. And so I've got a newsletter, too, once you subscribe. I also have a YouTube channel with over 100 videos on it, Nootropics Expert, that has got a ton of information. People seem to love that. We've got a Facebook page, Nootropics Expert, and I try to tweet a couple of times a week, so I'm on Twitter. And my book, Head First, The Complete Guide to Healing and Optimizing Your Brain with Nootropic Supplements, that's available for less than what you'd pay for a pre-formulated nootropic stack. So I think it's well worth it. And you can also I also offer personal consultations. You can hire me for an hour and I'll walk you through this stuff. Just tell me what your problems are, what kind of meds you're taking, what kind of supplement you're using right now, what your goals are, and we'll spend an hour together and we'll figure out what you can do to make things better.
Absolutely brilliant. And that's a whole range of things for everybody. There really is no excuse now for anybody. Whatever you've taken from this last 60 minutes together, David's resources will help you to go to that next level. Whether it's the ebook, the videos, or booking time with David, it will definitely be worth your while. David, thank you so much. It's been absolutely brilliant. I look forward to follow-up conversations because I'm pretty sure they're going to be them. And as far as for you and me goes, enjoy the rest of the summer in Miami and good health, sir, to you and your family.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a pleasure. Cheers.